Tony, before the show starts, I think you need to tell folks we're on social media.
I do. We're on social media.
Well, there you go. We're now on Facebook and Instagram, and it's at Going Hollywood Pod on both of those.
So that's our handle, at Going Hollywood Pod, on both Facebook and Instagram.
And what are we posting, Tony?
And we're going to just be posting, we'll talk about the show occasionally, but mostly it's just going to be like, what's happening? Who's a birthday? Who do we want to talk about and commemorate today? Who died? Because that happens a lot. It'll be fun.
So it's at Going Hollywood Pod, and it's Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the show notes or on the website, goinghollywoodpodcast.com. You'll find them there too.
Go on, stay tuned.
The McKay residence, the lady of the house speaking. Do I sound like a Chinese takeaway? I am a highly desirable private residence in an area of outstanding natural property values. And I'm waiting for your apology. Unless, of course, the thought of bean shoots and crispy wonton have totally stir-fried your basic good manners. Now, kindly clear this line. There are people of substance in this community who are probably queuing to ring me at this very moment. Your suggestion is noted. But I see little practical merit in having the telephone up my jumper.
How do you spell bouquet?
B-U-C-K-E-T.
Oh, bucket.
It's my sister, Violet, you remember? The one with the large house, the sauna, and room for a pony. How fares the church worldwide, then, Vicar? For example, what is the missionary position in China these days? Elizabeth, if you could pass round my royal Doulton with the hand-painted periwinkles.
Must I, Hyacinth? I'm terrified of dropping one.
There's one thing I can't stand. It's snobbery and one-uppishness. People who try to pretend they're superior. Makes it so much harder for those of us who really are.
Hello, I'm film historian Tony Maeda.
And I'm Brad Shreve, who's just a guy who likes movies.
We discuss movies and television from Hollywood's golden age. We go behind the scenes and share our opinions, too.
And of course, being the average guy, my opinions are the ones that matter.
As does your self-delusion. Welcome to Going Hollywood.
Tony, I have one announcement and then something I have to say before we begin.
Oh.
So the announcement is to our Brit friends out there, because twice I've been in conversations where people were like, oh, I love British television. I love Keeping Up Appearances, or I love Have You Been Served? And they're like, that was like 100 years ago.
Or AbFab.
So yes. And so,
do we have any British listeners out there?
Oh, of course we do.
That.
Yes, we do. We actually.
I love you all. I love that.
We have more Brits than Canadians.
Really?
Yes, for some reason.
That surprises me.
Hey, Canada,
wow.
Catch up.
Yeah, right? I can't think of Canadian series anyway. Well, that's so appropriate for today.
Yeah, I wish I could remember some of the towns and cities out there, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But yes, they're there. So we are aware that these are old shows, but that's what our show is all about. So this isn't one of those situations where we don't realize. The other thing, I have some sad news before we begin talking about Hyacinth and family.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
There's been a miniseries on Disney. It's part of the Marvel Universe.
Oh, God.
It's about witches. It's called Agatha All Along.
Right.
And Agatha, her home is featured a lot in this show. And it is clear as day the Stevens house from Bewitched.
Oh.
And they've used it so much over the years. And usually they try and, hide it a little bit. But no, it's clear as day. And I'm so excited. And then it hit me. It's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone. And I was so sad. And I thought, I don't recall, did they really knock it down? So I looked up online, which I should not have done. And I saw the machine tearing it to the ground. So
it's totally, I just drove by it a couple of days ago. The whole lot, the whole back lot, the old Warner's back lot or Columbia back lot, Screen Gems. Gone. Now big studios, big sound stages gone. Oh. Yeah, I know. Think about how long that was there. How long that all those homes were there, this cute little residential area for decades they were there. And now they're gone. I don't know. I can't escape the metaphor. I just can't.
There's been so much filmed there that more than people even realize. As you said, the Friends fountain was there.
The Friends fountain, they actually moved the Friends fountain to the Warner Brothers lot.
Okay, so it's still there.
I mean, that was saved, but they didn't move the Bewitched house. They didn't move the Bellows house. They didn't move the I Dream of Jeannie house. They didn't move, all the way up into the middle with Patricia Heaton. They were filming on that lot.
Yeah, Partridge Family was there. It's just
all gone.
Crazy. So sad. So a moment of silence for the Warner Brothers lot and Morning Glory Circle. Okay. So let's have some fun.
Speaking of English towns, if you're ever in Warwick, in England, you might see another house, which I believe is still standing, which is the house of Hyacinth and Richard Bucket, spelled Bucket, from our show today, Keeping Up Appearances. How is that? How about that? That's fantastic.
It's Bucket. It's always been Bucket until he met her.
It's Bouquet. It's so funny. I love this series, obviously. We kind of came to this series, we mentioned it offhandedly because we were talking about famous characters which are never seen. That famous conceit of sitcom characters which are never seen, like Maris from Frasier. Like, I think we were talking about Lars from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Mm-hmm. And I just, off the top of my head, thought, oh my God, Sheridan from Keeping Up Appearances. And we both said, I love that show. We have to do it. So that's how this came about.
And typically we go before 1990.
Right.
This breaks the rules just a tad, but who cares?
It does. It's a classic as far as I'm concerned. Just for these 90s fashions. Just for the fashions of the 90s alone. The vicar's wife in those long, oversized sweaters and skirt. Oh, God, I'm having such 90s flashbacks when I watch this show. And I wasn't even living in Warwickshire. I wasn't even living in England.
And this show is bigger than I ever realized. I know lots of people that love it.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was as widespread as it is. Once it got to, obviously it was a huge hit in the UK. And then it came to PBS, became very popular here. It showed in 70 different countries.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it said it had been sold 1,000 times. It is the BBC Worldwide's most exported television program ever. Ever. That's amazing to me.
And there's only 44 episodes.
5 series. The Brits call them series, not seasons, which I love.
We're going to call it season because I'll keep slipping up otherwise. Well, we can say series. All right, we'll say series. We'll say series.
Series, let's try it. But you love that because you think no TV show should be more than 5.
Yes, I think it's great. I liked her decision to walk away when it was time, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
The whole time I'm like, you did well. You did well, Ms. Rutledge.
But 44 episodes, 5 seasons, 5 series. I've already done it. Let's just do seasons. We're American. Let's just do seasons because I'm going to screw up otherwise. For context, I Love Lucy's very first season was 36 episodes.
Yeah.
The second season, I think, was almost 39. So this is basically 44 episodes, kind of like what we have now. Where I think the most episodes were, I think they did like a couple seasons of 8 episodes of Keeping Up Appearances, and one season was maybe 5. I mean, really. And they did Christmas episodes, which is what we're going to do. I think I want to mention that before we go any further. We're kind of taking the model from Keeping Up Appearances and Downton Abbey and these British shows as we are wrapping up our very first season. We have a couple more episodes left before we're going to call it a day for our first season. But we will be back for a special Christmas episode, which is what Keeping Up Appearances did, and also Downton Abbey did. A lot of British shows do that. They stop their series, their seasons, and then they come back for a special Christmas episode, which is very cool, I think.
Exactly. So we're going to take a little break, but we'll remind you we're still around with the Christmas episode.
We'll be back for our special Christmas episode. Then before we begin series 2 of Going Hollywood sometime in 2025. But right now, Keeping Up Appearances, created by the wonderful Roy Clark, and not the hee-haw Roy Clark. The British producer and writer, not director and writer, Roy Clark, who created this incredible sitcom about this iconic character. I want to ask you a couple things. First of all, what was your first experience of Keeping Up Appearances? Was it PBS when was it airing here?
I don't have a clue.
You know how it came in your consciousness?
I have no clue. I was with my ex, and I think I stumbled on it. I don't think somebody
Yeah.
said you should watch this. I probably was trying to find something. I probably was watching because I loved Are You Being Served? And I thought, God, I
Yeah.
haven't seen that in a while. And I probably was looking at and stumbled on this. I think that's how it happened.
You know, with me, this was when you said when we said we wanted to do this. This is one of the reasons why, because my parents loved this show. They would call it Hyacinth. They'd say after dinner, "Let's watch Hyacinth. Let's watch Hyacinth." And at that time, I think it had made it to Netflix by that point. But when as they were getting older, and especially as they were dealing with health issues, this was one of the shows that we could watch together, and they loved Hyacinth. So I have a very soft place in my heart for Keeping Up Appearances and Hyacinth because I have memories of sharing it with my parents as their health was declining. And you know, somebody told me one time that the reason that people as they get older gravitate and watch the same shows over and over and over again, like Matlock, which my dad was obsessed with Matlock, Andrew Griffith Show, is because shows like Keeping Up Appearances are so broad and so funny, but so easy to follow. They're not convoluted like, say, Veep or anything that we're kind of watching on TV now, which you have to really pay attention. These are very standard, strict structures, which are basically classic sitcom forms, but are so very funny. And that's certainly this show.
Well, as I'm watching them, I'm thinking, it's so understated.
Keeping Up Appearances?
Yes. As far as, we'll get into why I'm going to say that, such as things aren't she's over the top, but I'll give you an example. One of the episodes we're going to talk about is Rose is talking about her prayer book, that she has a prayer book. She's met a guy that's religious. And as she's talking on the phone about it, you see Violet and Oslo just giggling. In the United States, they would have been laughing and they would have made fun of her. And they didn't do that. They just showed them giggling. And I thought that is so cool.
I have the opposite impression because of how big Dame Patricia is. I mean, she is, but with such commitment. And that's the thing that I think is so amazing about the incredible Dame Patricia Rutledge, who, by the way, is still with us. Mm-hmm. Okay. 95 years old. God bless her. She is still alive and kicking. She's so big, but she's so committed. And I love that. That's the way to do it. She's so committed to every movement, every gesture, every action. And that's what makes it so funny, is because she's so committed to this broadness that it works. And I find it different. You know what? And I think this is important to point out too. You know, what was concurrent with Keeping Up Appearances, what was on big time in Keeping Up Appearances was, of course, Absolutely Fabulous. I mean, these were the two, they were both at the same time, the early 90s. And they're like two benchmarks of these great British sitcoms. And they're very similar, but they're very different, obviously, in character development. But they're both very, in my opinion, they're both very broad. The main characters are very broad, but these actors are so committed to their motivations, to their actions, that it works. What do you think?
I agree. I'm trying to figure out how to explain the understated part. I'm not a big fan of AbFab. I've tried to watch it. I should try it again because everybody tells me how much they love it.
You just need to watch the original series, the original AbFab series. There's 3 seasons or 4 seasons. They're the best. When they kept redoing it over and over again, it just was diminishing returns. But go ahead.
Maybe I watched the wrong one. That could have been.
You need to watch the originals from the early 90s. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make sure I do that again. We'll give it another try because all I hear is how wonderful it is. I'm like, what the hell?
But the original's the best.
What I find interesting is these are almost like little skits that are tied together with a story. Like, it shows Hyacinth and Richard doing something, and then it cuts over to Oslo and his wife and Mary, or not Mary, Rose.
Daisy Rose, yes.
Daisy Rose. And Violet's the wealthy one. And
she's a sister with the sauna and room for a pony.
Yes, the Mercedes, the sauna and the room for the pony.
Mercedes, the sauna, room for a pony, and the musical bidet in the last musical bidet. She got that in there. She got a musical bidet too.
Yeah. And she said bidet differently. It took me a while to figure out what she was saying. So it shows them. It shows Richard and Hyacinth at their house, and then it goes to the other house, and then it goes over to the neighbor's house, and they're all like different things going on that are not related in any way, almost, and then they all tie together in the end.
Yeah,
It's,
they do. They all come together,
Yeah, it's very interesting.
and they all come together to humiliate Hyacinth.
Yes.
Basically, she gets her comeuppance because for anybody who doesn't know what Keeping Up Appearances is about, it's about Hyacinth Bucket, pronounced bouquet, but spelled Bucket, which is, of course, the greatest running gag throughout the whole series. And it's in her attempts to prove her social superiority and to gain standing with those she considers upper class, because she is definitely of the lower class. And her attempts to find standing with those in the upper class are constantly thwarted by her lower class extended family, which is basically her sisters, all named after Flora. Daisy, Rose, Violet, and Hyacinth. They're all flower names. And Hyacinth is just the perfect name because it's the most ridiculously supercilious flower. And it stars the fabulous Dame Patricia Rutledge, who is just one of a kind.
I'm almost certain that Richard Hyacinth live on Blossom Drive or Blossom Lane.
Do they?
Yes. The street is a flower too. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I know they live in the county of Warwick.
Yes.
In London, which is in the central part of England, just northeast of London.
And Hyacinth comes from a lower class background, but
Right.
she and Richard are kind of lower middle class.
Exactly.
And she's trying to fit in with the upper middle class and the well-to-do.
Exactly. But it's funny because the character of Hyacinth, I think most people think it was created for Patricia Rutledge, and it wasn't. It wasn't. This series was created by Roy Clark, and they just happened to find in one of those weird kind of one in a million things the perfect actress to play this part. I mean, I really can't imagine any other actress playing this part Patricia Rutledge has made it so much her own that how could you possibly? Can you think of anybody? It's
No.
kind of like Ab Fab, and I couldn't think of anybody besides Jennifer Saunders and Joanna Lumley playing Adina and Patsy. So she made it so much her own, but it was not created for her. That is a myth. She was hired to play this part.
But I believe she was the first one they thought of when they came up with the idea.
Yeah, I think she's the only one they thought of.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, I mean, my God.
And Patricia Rutledge, what I am just amazed with is, and you halfway mentioned it, is if you could block out the screen except for her face, the gestures on her face are just incredible.
Oh, she's so big. That's what I'm saying is she's so big. She's so broad in her comedy. It's almost like silent film comedy. Everything on her face, but she's so committed to it. We've talked about that before in other episodes about how, these actors are so committed to the broadness of their character. I'm trying to remember what it was we talked about where we were talking about how committed they were. In Murder by Death. These actors are so committed to the persona they're creating. She's so committed to every single moment as Hyacinth. And that commitment, that truth makes it work. It's totally why this show works, because of her commitment.
Oh, yeah.
All of them, but mostly Patricia Rutledge.
She is Hyacinth.
Oh, completely.
I've never seen her interviewed. I'm sure she's not, but it would be hard for me to imagine. Well, they did a play in 2010, and I can't imagine what it was like with a different cast.
Yeah.
Especially her character.
I don't want to see anybody else playing her.
No.
I really don't, because it's hers. It would be like somebody else playing Patsy or Adina, as far as I'm concerned. Because she's made it so much of her own. And that's why, yeah, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could watch that at all.
No.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. But Patricia Rutledge, I mean, for people who don't know, Patricia Rutledge was a very accomplished actress before this came about. She was a Tony winner.
Yeah, theater.
She won a Tony for Darling of the Day, a Broadway musical. So she was a big musical theater actress, worked in the United States and a lot of television in Britain in the 60s and the 70s. A lot of that, the great British satires of the 60s. That was the week that was. She was in that. She's part of that whole wonderful movement, the whole Benny Hill thing that we think of. She wasn't in Benny Hill, but you know what I'm saying? It's that whole kind of movement of satire in Britain. And Patricia Rutledge was a big part of that. So, you know, she had some chops when it came to to this kind of comedy. Absolutely.
Yeah, she's just incredible. I did watch Young Hyacinth. We'll talk about it later, but that was really
We know
disappointing.
about that later, yeah.
Yeah.
But Roy Clark, who created this series, called her, I love this, called her a stately galleon, which I think is such a perfect description of Hyacinth Bouquet and her adventures. Do you want to talk a little bit about how we're going to approach this and what we're going to do for this particular episode on Keeping Up Appearances?
Exactly. Yeah, we're doing what we normally do. Tony picked out 2 episodes. I picked out 2 episodes. And I picked out the 2 that I remembered most, and I'm glad I did. And I think one of yours I don't recall at all. I really enjoyed it. And so we're just going to talk about them. We're going to actually do one at a time because we skipped seasons between us. And so we're going to go over those episodes.
We did, but you know what we didn't do? Neither one of us chose one from the first season, the first series of Keeping Up Appearances. Because I think our very first one is in series 2.
Yes.
Which is mine, which is called The Candlelight Supper. So this cast, I just want to talk a minute about this cast and this wonderful cast of characters, supporting characters, particularly your sisters. I mean, Judy Cornwell, who's also still alive. I believe just Dame Patricia and Judy from this fabulous cast are the only ones who are still with us. So God bless.
I think you're right.
As Daisy, Jeffrey Hughes as Onslow. There were 2 Roses. What did you think of the first Rose, which was only in the first season? Shirley Stelfox was her name.
I will say out of the entire cast, I am least fond of Mary Millen, the second Rose, because I feel like when I'm watching her, I watch somebody acting.
Right.
I feel like the others are who they are. And so I didn't remember the other one, who is Shirley Stelfox.
Yeah.
And so I went back to the first season and watched a few of the scenes. I liked her better.
Really? Really?
Yeah. Do you do the opposite?
Well, I love Mary Millar. I don't think that Shirley Stelfox is quite the femme fatale that Mary Millar is. And Mary Millar, who sadly died in 1998, not long after the show ended, of ovarian cancer. So God bless her. I mean, Rose is such a bombshell. Rose is such a sex pot. And I think that Mary Millar has that to a T. You know, unfortunately, the thing about Rose's basic function is to come in and talk about the latest man in her life. I mean, there's not really much more. Every single episode,
That's pretty much all she does. Yeah.
she comes in and talks about, you know, the man who's giving her grief right now, or the man that she wants to give her grief right now, or she's pining after the vicar, that dishy vicar, that dishy divorcee who lives next to Emmett. You know, probably my favorite character next to Hyacinth is, of course, the divine Elizabeth, Liz, played by Josephine Tucson, who is their next door neighbor, who is just so wonderful and always living in fear of Hyacinth saying, "Coffee in 5 minutes, Elizabeth," because she'll always do something to destroy Hyacinth's royal Doonton china.
With the hand-painted periwinkles.
Hand-painted periwinkles. And half the fun of watching those scenes is how is Elizabeth going to destroy something? She's going to break something. She's going to make a mess about something. And you think, oh, no, it's not going to happen this episode. And in some way it does. And that's what's so delicious about this show.
And it makes me a nervous wreck watching her because she does it so well.
It does. It's all part of it.
She's shaking. She's so afraid something's going to go wrong. And it always does. And I'm like, oh, that poor thing. Well, since you mentioned her, I got to say, I was watching an interview with her, and she said actually something I've heard other cast members of this show have said, which I believe is 100%. The reason why this show was so popular is we all know a Hyacinth.
Yeah, we do.
Maybe not to that degree, but we all know a Hyacinth.
Right. Yeah, I think we all have a little bit of Hyacinth in us.
Yes.
I mean, hello, have you looked at social media lately? I mean, that's Hyacinth, okay? That's keeping up the appearance that your life is fabulous and that your life is superior in some way, which is Hyacinth Bucket. That is who she is. And so I think we can all pretty much identify with Hyacinth and identify with Hyacinth's frustrations because she's always thwarted at the end of the day.
Yes.
She always gets her comeuppance, usually by her family. I love how her family always just shows up
Yes.
wherever she is. Like one of my episodes that we're going to talk about is Please Mind Your Head, where Hyacinth actually rents a small micro. I mean, it's not even a mini. It's not even a little house. What are those shows that are on HGTV right now? Mini home. It's not even that. I mean, it's so tiny. It's minuscule. And somehow her family shows up there. And it's just the story of the episode is how they get there. But anyway, I'm way ahead of myself. We'll get to that episode. So should we just jump into our episodes?
Yes, but I have one more thing I want to say because you were talking about we all have a little bit of her in here. If Hyacinth was young today, she would be an influencer.
Oh, God, yeah.
They sit there and they try to make it look they're on these great vacations and it's all set up. Like they may take 1,000 pictures or 1,000 videos of this, but they show only the best and then they're making a fortune off the clothing and they're not really living that lifestyle.
No, not at all.
That would be totally her.
It's all about keeping up the appearance.
Yes.
Hello. Great title, by the way. Great title. I call it Hyacinth because that's what my parents called it, but keeping up appearances.
I think it's time to go to one of Hyacinth's candlelight suppers.
Well, and that's what we're going to do from series/season to episode 3. My first episode is called The Candlelight Supper. And it originally aired September 15th, 1991, and it's written by Roy Clark, the creator of this series, and directed by Harold Snowd, his partner, who also directed, I think, every episode of this series. God love it.
I looked around and that's pretty much all I could find.
Yeah, I think it was these two always,
Yes.
constantly, because they worked together. They had worked together at the BBC since the 70s. They created this show called The Last of the Summer Wine, which is the longest running show in BBC history. It was on for like 30 seasons.
Wow.
I mean, up until, it's crazy how long the show, I remember that was on PBS as well. But anyway, so it's called The Candlelight Supper, and I chose it because anybody who knows anything about keeping up appearances knows that one of the hallmarks of Hyacinth's life are her candlelight suppers. And this episode has almost all of the hallmarks of keeping up appearances. So if I was ever going to suggest, there's so many episodes, like Mary Tyler Moore, like Bewitched. There's not so many episodes actually, but there are so many choices. And I had difficulty. I changed my mind a couple times. But then I thought, no, I have to do this one because it has all the hallmarks. So if you're ever going to ask anybody to recommend an episode, for me, to recommend an episode of Keeping Up Appearances, it is this one because it's got all the benchmarks. It starts with the phone call. There's always a phone call,
Yes.
whether it be from Sheridan, whether it be for somebody thinking that Hyacinth is a Chinese takeaway. No, this is not the Chinese takeaway. This is a slimline phone in a highly admired residential area. It has the phone calls. It has Elizabeth visiting for coffee, and it has a candlelight supper. And it also has, this is also Emmett's first season. Emmett, who is Elizabeth's divorced brother, joined in the second series/season of Keeping Up Appearances. And he is terrified of Hyacinth singing at him. Hyacinth loves to sing at him because he's basically a musical theater director. He's a musician and he's doing plays. And of course, Hyacinth thinks she's a brilliant singer. And by the way, Patricia Rutledge is a brilliant singer. But Hyacinth is not. So the episode starts with the phone call, with the phone ringing. And, in Hyacinth's iconic, the bouquet residence, lady of the house speaking. And it's actually not the Chinese takeaway or Sheridan. It is a return call to Hyacinth from the sanitation department. Because Hyacinth has requested that the bin lorries, God, I love Brits. I love that. A bin lorry. We call it garbage truck. The bin lorry not come down her street on days in which they're not picking up her trash. She says, I understand you coming down on Tuesdays because that's when you pick up my bin. But I know what they're doing the other days. They're taking the shortcut. So she's requesting that the sanitation department do not drive down her street on days when they're not picking up her garbage, which is just hysterically funny.
Do you
love
remember her
that.
wordage as to why it was that she didn't want people to think she had excess?
They're taking the shortcut.
But no, but she was saying that she didn't want people to think she had excess trash, and she said it in a much more elegant way than that. It was hysterical.
Yeah, she didn't want people to think she had excess garbage that she was throwing out, and she didn't like the aesthetics of it. So I love that. And then we have, as I said, we have Emmett who's afraid of Hyacinth singing at him because Hyacinth wants to be in his musicals. And so what happens in this episode is basically she is getting ready for one of her epic candlelight suppers. And we hear about these candlelight suppers, and now we're actually going to see the process of it. After she runs into Emmett outside, she gets another phone call. It's a phone call from her sister Violet with the luxury bungalow, the swimming pool, and room for a pony. Now, we never see Violet. Violet is the other sister who has made her life a little bit better than what she was born with because she has a Mercedes and a swimming pool and room for a pony and a luxury bungalow. We only see Violet in the last season. And Violet's husband, Bruce, we also only see in the last season. So Violet is also almost like Sheridan, one of these great unseen characters. And the thing about Violet and Bruce is that Bruce is clearly having gender identity issues. Now, this is kind of tricky for the 90s.
Yes.
It's very funny, but you kind of have to put your mind back into the 90s because Bruce is always wearing Violet's clothing and is basically passed out. I mean, it's problematic today, but it's very funny the way it's presented. I love it. And then we cut to, of course, another hallmark of this show is Onslow and Daisy in bed. They're always in bed, and they're usually reading. Daisy's usually reading one of her paperback romance novels. Mm-hmm. And Onslow can be reading the Financial Times. He can be reading books about quantum physics. Now, these two are, for anybody who doesn't know who Daisy and Onslow are, they're what Hyacinth came from. They're pretty lower class. And they're sitting there reading, of course, Daisy's reading her romances and Onslow's reading, quantum physics. And it's very funny. And Rose, of course, barges in with her man problems. I mean, this is all hallmarks of what this show does. It does it over and over and over again in this series. And I think that they do them so well in this episode because they're pretty much, now they're set. We have kind of like the parameters of what this show is about. So we know that Hyacinth is going to be doing some kind of event or want to get into something. She's going to be singing at Richard. She's going to have a phone call from Violet or Sheridan, and Onslow and Daisy are going to be in bed, and Rose is going to come in with her man problems. Do you like this episode?
I love this episode. We didn't say who Sheridan is. Sheridan is their never seen son. We only hear from him on the phone.
Yes, one of the great unseen characters.
Yes, and he's not what Hyacinth thinks he is. We'll just say he's artistic and has lots of male friends.
He's artistic. Well, his roommate Tarquin, there is a phone call from, another reason why I love this episode, there's a phone call from Sheridan in this episode calling to wish your mummy success with her candlelight supper. Oh, we're psychically linked, Sheridan, she says. And he's not. Of course, he's asking for money because he's always calling to ask for money, but she justifies it as, I was just thinking of you, Sheridan. We were psychically bonded. How wonderful. Oh, and I don't want you to be spending money on girls. Oh, you don't like girls. Oh, okay. Good. Tarquin, I think he ends the conversation. He's got to help Tarquin finish his ironing. So... Don't worry, we're not going to spend it on girls. Oh, good. It makes the mother happy. I'm doing a terrible dialect, but you know what I'm saying.
And again, this is, somewhat understated, but it's actually what makes it funny. It's never said that he's gay, but Richard obviously knows. The looks on his face, and he rolls his eyes like, how is she so blind?
But he's keeping it, he's warming his mother's heart that he's not wasting his money. He's too young for girls. He doesn't want girls. Tarquin and he are busy making drapes, or they're doing the ironing. Sheridan is a brilliant character. He's a brilliant character. So this episode is basically Hyacinth getting ready for the candlelight supper, and Richard, her slave, husband Richard. I love the scene where Richard is polishing the silver. And he's making noises, and she goes, "Don't grunt, Richard. I don't think it's quite nice to hear people breathing." Because Hyacinth does not have any tolerance for the normal functions of everyday life. They're very much beneath her because she's putting out her best things. Not only is she putting out her royal Doulton with the hand painted periwinkles, she's got her royal Worcester double glazed Avignon, which are serving dishes, and she has a solid silver I knew I was going to mess that up. And she has a solid silver self-cleaning sauce separator. Now, say that again. She has a solid silver self-cleaning sauce separator.
I want you to say that 7 times.
Oh my God! How do these actors do this?
I'm always amazed when they can do that.
It's incredible, and because they're British and they can do it and they have the language. So she's getting ready. But here's 2 things that I love about this episode, which aren't in every single episode. One of my favorite things about this episode is Hyacinth has discovered in her garden outside on the street, someone has left her a present. And she is not happy. And she wants Richard to do something about it. Well, a few moments later in the episode, a gentleman's walking by Hyacinth's house, and she just happens to be outside. And she says, "I believe your dog. I have something of your dog's." And she points to the ground, and of course, it's the dog poop. And she just happens to have a shovel and a bag in her hand and hands it to the gentleman. And she looks at him with such disapproval. I remember that scene, and I was like, what episode is that from? And I watched so many episodes to try to find that scene, and it was this episode. So that's why I'm so happy that it was in this episode. So that happens. And of course, one of the hallmarks of Keeping Up Appearances, coffee with Elizabeth, which as I said before, one of the reasons to watch Keeping Up Appearances is just to see how Elizabeth is going to he's either going to break something or make a horrible mess during the coffee because she gets so nervous being around Hyacinth. And in this episode, I love this episode because Hyacinth says to her, "Do you want my good china or would you like a beaker?" Which, a beaker, I believe in British slang, is a mug. And Elizabeth thinks about it and goes, a beaker, I think, would be best. And she goes, "I think that would be best too, don't you, dear?"
And I know it's a running joke, and I don't know if it's on every episode. You'll have to let me know. Whenever Elizabeth is about to sit down, she says, "Oh, no, over here, dear. I like to look out the window."
Elizabeth can never figure out which chair to sit in. She always picks the wrong one, and she'll stand there. Yes, it was in this episode because Hyacinth likes to look out the window. So she'll come and she'll say, "Okay, I'll sit in this because Hyacinth likes to look out the window." And then Hyacinth will say, "Oh no, dear, I want to sit over here. I want to be close to the whatever." You know what I mean? It always changes. So Elizabeth is always on edge whenever she has coffee with Hyacinth, but she always does it. And that's one thing that Emmett always says to her is like, say no. And she's like, "It'll be over with. You just have to close your eyes. It's like a nightmare. It'll be over with. You just have to get through it. It's the best way to deal with it." But she always ends up breaking something. In this particular episode, Hyacinth gets a phone call from Violet, yet another phone call from Violet, and she leaves, and Elizabeth relaxes for a while, and then Hyacinth pops her head back in, and Elizabeth drops her cookie into her coffee and makes a mess. So there's always a mess. There's always a mess in the episodes. I think the coffee scenes are probably my favorite out of all the scenes in Keeping Up Appearances. What do you think?
Yes, and I think it's because of Josephine Tewson, who plays Liz. She is so good.
She is.
Like I said, when she's on the screen, I'm like a nervous wreck, but in a good way.
She is. Well, what's interesting about this is Emmett's, since Emmett has just joined the series, because this is only the second season series. Emmett has just joined, so this is his very first candlelight supper. And that's when Liz says to him, it's like a nightmare. It's only a couple hours. And he says, "A couple hours?" And you just have to get through it. There'll be other people there. So the reason that Hyacinth wants to invite Emmett to this particular candlelight supper is so she can sing at him. And he knows she's going to sing at me. She's going to sing at me. So Hyacinth has arranged with Richard that she will already be at the pianoforte playing and singing when Emmett and Elizabeth arrive. So those happen to casually catch her singing. Well, of course, Hyacinth's family once again has to throw a wrench into the plan because You know, the man that Rose is having the issues with is a Mr. Hallowell, and she just met him. She just met him stumbling out of a bar.
Oh, he's a religious man who drinks? No, I was stumbling out of the bar.
She was stumbling out of the bar. He wasn't, I was. And she wants to give a good impression, and she doesn't want to bring him to where she lives with Daisy and Onslow. So she could always clean, but she attempts that, and she's like, I'm not going to clean. I'll just have him meet him at Our Hyacinths. I wanted to ask you about that. Don't you think it's funny how they always say Our Hyacinth, Our Rose? That's such a British... I've never heard that in any other series, though. Have you? They say that in Are You Being Served?
I've heard it here and there, but nothing to the degree that they do on this show, and it works perfectly.
Our Rose, Our Hyacinth.
Yes.
I have him meet us at Our Hyacinths. So she decides, okay, she's going to have her new man meet her at Hyacinth's house. But she also has a date with Boris, one of her regulars. So she decides that she's going to have... So she shows up at the candlelight supper, at the time of the candlelight supper, when Hyacinth thinks it's going to be Emmett and Liz, and it's not, it's Rose. She's saying, I'm not staying, I'm here so Mr. Hallowell will pick me up here. And of course, Boris shows up at the same time. So there's a fight outside of Hyacinth's house. So
And this is the first time that Rose meets Emmett, am I right?
it is.
Yes.
He's dishy.
Yes,
That
he's dishy.
divorcee.
Every man's dishy to her.
So Rose says to Hyacinth, I'm not going to go out with Mr. Hallowell. I'm not going to go out with Boris. I'm going to stay here with this dishy divorcee. And Hyacinth is freaking out as these two men are fighting. So Rose goes outside to try to stop the fight. It's this huge mess outside. Hyacinth thinks the best way to distract everyone from what's going on outside is to bring them into the lounge area, also known as the living room, and sing, and that's how the episode ends, with Hyacinth singing an incredibly off-key rendition of Rose of England as these two men are fighting outside, and yet another candlelight supper goes down the toilet. I love this episode because, as I said, it's got all the hallmarks of Keeping Up Appearances that you want to watch, but it has other little Easter eggs, like the dog poop, which I think are hysterical. And, I almost forgot. And we have our one phone call from Sheridan, which we had talked about before,
Yes.
asking for money. So you have it all here. You have phone calls from Violet. You have a phone call from Sheridan. And you have Liz having coffee and a candlelight supper. It's like an embarrassment of riches in this episode.
It's great. It's just great.
It is great. I love it.
Tony, you and I get excited when we get messages and emails and texts from listeners that tell us how much they enjoy the show.
We do.
But I think we should push it a little bit and ask them to go a little bit further.
Ooh, a challenge.
If you enjoy this show, let others know. 5 stars are great, whatever you want to give, except 1 star. If you have 1 star, say, that show's not for me and move on.
Yeah, you don't give us 1 star. Just say, no, not for me. Just skip it. Or tell your friends. That's the best way too, right? Tell your friends, hey, I have this great fun podcast with these 2 kooky guys who talk about movies and TV. We run the gamut. We have everything.
Yeah, we're all over the place.
We're all over the place is a better way to put it.
But in a good way. So do it right now before you forget. My episode is from the next season, Season 3, Episode 7, What to Wear When Yachting. And it's from 18 October of 1992. And you'll have to jog my memory. If I remember correct, this did not begin with the phone call. It started right away with the man fixing wonky telly.
Yes.
So
another hallmark, which of a handyman or some kind of utilitarian man who visits the buckets, and he has to deal with Hyacinth.
Yeah, so she opens up the door, and it's the man, and he said, "Are you the lady that has the wonky telly?" And she says, "No, I'm the lady of the house that has the television that requires adjusting." And he makes her creep through the house because he can't touch the walls.
Well, but what does she do before he even enters the house?
He has to take off his shoes. And he doesn't want to, and she insists. And he takes off his shoes, and his toes are sticking through his holy sock.
He has a hole in his sock. And the look she gives him, that look of disgust and resignation. Don't touch the walls. And she leads him down the hallway, right?
Yes, walking in this ridiculous manner to not touch the walls, like they're trying to walk sideways, kind of sideways. And it turns out when he asks her what's wrong with the television, she tells him that she wants him to install one of those little things that bleeps over every expletive.
That's what the set needs. Something to bleep over the explicatives. I love that. Don't you think she is Dame Edna? I mean, I watch her and I think she is so Dame Edna in this. Their expressions, the way they speak, they both speak in that received pronunciation, which is basically the upper class dialect of high society in the UK. I don't you think so? Doesn't she remind you of Dame Edna?
You know, I haven't thought of Dame Edna in ages, and I think you've nailed it. Yes.
It really is the same character. Well, they're the same social stratus, so they speak the same way, but they have the same facial expressions, and this. I just think it really, really is the same biting kind of put down humor. I think so. But anyway, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. You're talking about your episode.
Oh.
I just wanted to get that in there.
So we go from Hyacinth with the television repairman for her wonky television, and we go over to Oslo and Violet and Rose. And Violet gets a call from Mr. Bartholomew. And this is
Rose gets the call.
And Rose gets a call from Mr. Bartholomew, who is the man that is the more religious. And she tells him that she's reading her prayer book. Mm-hmm. And this is why I love that she's talking about she's reading her prayer book, and that she always has her prayer book. And I'm sorry, I keep getting Violet and Daisy mixed up. Because they all have these flowers. My
They're all
God,
named after flowers.
They made it really difficult to talk about. So Daisy and Oslo are just sitting there giggling, and I love what Oslo says. Rose gets off the phone. Oslo asks for a beer. And he says, I'm completely surrounded by no beer.
No, by no beer. Yeah, I like that line. That was great.
I love this bunch. If this was made in the United States, they would live in a trailer park in the middle of Wichita, which I'm sorry for our Kansas friends, but that's what I think.
They would.
Totally would. So then we go back to Hyacinth, and she is calling to get the shipping forecast with the Weather Bureau. And
I love that. Getting the shipping forecast.
Because they're yachting this weekend, so she needs to know the weather.
Why are they yachting?
Oh, they are yachting because Sheridan's friend got them
unnamed
got them a yacht to use for the weekend.
Yeah, that's so great.
But the Weather Bureau, I don't know what they call it. She gave the name, whatever they call the Weather Bureau, tells her that she is not entitled to a forecast. And she is furious over this and tells him it basically got to be on his head if they get lost in a hurricane.
But meanwhile, what does Richard tell her? The boat's going to be moored to the dock. They're not even going to be moving the boat. But she wants to know the shipping forecast.
And he's like, we're on a river. On a dock on the river.
On a dock on the river.
Or a berth, they say.
Yeah.
So then we cut over now to Liz and Emmett. It just keeps cutting. Just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
So now we cut over to Liz and Emmett. We have Emmett got a whole different scene, and they are talking about this weekend. And Emmett says, I don't want to hear yacht. If I never hear the word yacht again, it'll be too soon. And he says, I've heard nothing about yacht for the whole damn week and her nautical buffet.
That's right.
And he says, I can't imagine spending a night on some old bucket with another old bucket.
I love that line. That was one of my favorite lines.
And Liz is telling them they'll enjoy it. Okay. She's always trying to calm Emmett down and just go with the flow, which she can't even do. But she's always trying to get him to just go with the flow.
She has infinite patience, Elizabeth, that character.
Yes, she is.
She's a doll.
Yes. You know, you said this about Green Acres, that you reached the point where you were just like, this is too much. Oliver is just too much.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I love this show, at one point, I want somebody to say, Hyacinth, will you fuck off?
But you know what? Life does it to her. They don't need to.
No,
they don't need to because life does it to her. In one way or another, she always gets her comeuppance at the end.
But
she keeps on coming. She keeps on swinging.
Not even the
Rather than
mailman wants to come to her door. The postman.
The milkman.
The
Not there,
milkman.
are they?
Nobody wants to come to her door. So
I hope that's a first-class stamp you're putting in that mail slot.
and so then it cuts over back to Richard and Hyacinth. And Richard is packing his bag. And Hyacinth is, of course, going every single item. And she's not happy with what Richard is packing because he needs a seagoing jersey. Because they are a seagoing country.
Yes. He doesn't have anything appropriate. He doesn't have anything nautical to wear.
No, nothing nautical to wear. So they are leaving the house. Richard wearing pretty much what he normally wears, a sweater and just a pair of slacks. And Hyacinth pops out looking like the boy on the Cracker Jack box.
So great. Such a great outfit.
Richard
that
says
white
people think-
hat with the bow. Oh.
Richard said she looks like people are going to think she's selling ice cream.
But he has to stop by number 32.
And
Did you notice that?
Is that always the house that they have to stop by?
They change. They change all the time. There's always some neighbor that she's got to impress. And in this episode, it's number 32. She wants number 32 to see her hat and know they're going yachting.
Because I know there's that episode that I absolutely love where she has the holiday brochures. And she wants wants them to drop out the window at the opportune moment for somebody to see that they're going to go on a holiday even though they're not. I was wondering if that was the same house, but
Different.
okay,
Yeah,
different house.
one.
No, they're not going everywhere, but they need to see that she has holiday brochures.
Yes, exactly.
So yes, they're driving away, and she has to let the people at number 32 know. So as usual, she screams to Richard to stop, and he always thinks there's something going on. He slams the brakes, and once again, always tells her to stop doing that. And she gets out, and she's just like a nut, waving down the street with her. And she tells Richard to get out, and she says, "Say something nautical, Richard."
Say something nautical.
So that because she wants them to know that she's going yachting. So anyway, they end up leaving that, and they go to a men's store because she wants Richard to get something nautical finally.
Yes.
And finally, apparently, he finds something because she comes walking out, and Richard comes out looking like the Old Spice sailor. And I love those two guys that walk by. Hello, sailor.
Hello, sailor. In his little shorts. Richard in his little shorts.
Yeah.
God bless him. Clive Swift. God bless him.
He's
so funny.
Talking about Liz having patience. Oh, my
Oh,
God.
well, yeah. Everybody. Yes. Everybody. Poor Richard.
Oh, my God.
You know.
Poor suffering Richard.
Mhm.
My
Poor
God.
suffering Richard.
So they finally get to the boatyard, and Hyacinth goes in to get the key to the boat that they've been loaned. And she gets it, and she comes out, and she tells Richard that it's the Contessa II.
Right.
And so they walk down, and there's this very nice yacht. Hyacinth is just excited. She gets up, and she's standing on the very edge of the deck, and she makes Richard take pictures of her, and she's trying to do these poses.
It's a great yacht.
It is
It's
a great
yacht.
yacht. It is a great yacht, and you keep waiting for her to fall in, but she doesn't. She keeps stumbling.
She doesn't.
And Richard goes around to the back of the boat, and it is not the Contessa II.
Because the key doesn't fit.
Yes, he tries to start the key, and she goes, "Oh, they gave us the wrong key." Richard, go in and make sure you get the right key. And Richard gets off the boat, and he looks, and he goes, "Well, it's not the wrong key. This isn't the Contessa II." And of course, she's frustrated with her very flustered look on her face, as always. Like, how could those people beneath her do such a thing? And she gets off, and they're like, "Well, where are we supposed to go?" And Richard says, "Well, this is the same berth." And they look over, and there is this dumpy little yacht that Hyacinth is just beside herself.
You know what it looked like to me? It looked like the Minnow.
I thought
from
the
Gilligan's
exact
Island.
same thing. I thought
It's
that
like, yes.
it looked like the minnow after a shipwreck.
Exactly. They thought they were on Aristotle Onassis' yacht. And no, it's behind it, the Minnow from Gilligan's Island.
And so Richard's like, "It doesn't look so bad. It's just because it's up against this one." So Hyacinth says, "Oh, you're right. Let's move it away so it'll look better." So she makes Richard get in so he can move it away. And Hyacinth is on the deck. He clearly has no idea how to work a boat. Hyacinth is on the front deck. And of course, you're waiting for her to fall off immediately, which she doesn't.
Yeah.
And she's waiting there and she's directing Richard what to do. He finally hits the gas and he screams. And of course, you think Hyacinth fell into the water, but instead he jumps out and she's hanging over the rail with her feet in the air.
This has to be one of the most physical episodes ever, and so damn funny. I think it's one of the funniest physical comedy scenes I think they did in their entire series.
Yeah,
it's brilliant. How they filmed this, I have no idea. It must have been so difficult to film it because they are all over the place in that boat. And it is hysterically funny how they get into these situations.
And she insists that she did most of her own stunts.
Yeah, well,
I question that.
I don't think she did that many on that. I don't think she did them that much on the boat. I know there was definitely a stuntman doing Richard when he was dragged into the water.
Yes,
when she starts to take off, and she's like, "Richard, stop! Help me!" And he gets dragged along the boat, and she's trying to pull him in. I think that definitely was a stuntman. That couldn't have been poor old Clive Swift.
So Hyacinth gets on the dock. We're going to get to that part because she gets on the dock and Richard starts floating away. Of course, as always, she's telling him to stop playing around. He's floating away. He doesn't know what to do. He brings a boat back somehow. And she is floating away and she tosses him the rope. So you see poor Richard running down the bank as the boat is floating away with Hyacinth.
Well, he turns off the engine. She says, "Turn off the engine."
Yes.
And he's like, "Oh, duh." And she goes, "Men."
And she was also saying, "I order you to come back."
Yes.
So again, she's floating downstream, and poor Richard is holding onto this rope, running to try and keep up with her. And naturally, he finally gets dragged into the water.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "Richard, whatever made you do that? You are so careless." She is always saying things like that.
Yes, of course. Yeah. And be sure and get the right keys this time, Richard. She got the keys. Richard didn't get the keys to the yacht. She got the keys, but that's part of who Hyacinth is, do it right this time. Well, you're the one who did it.
And this is where poor Richard has his feet on the bank and his hands on the boat. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, exactly. And she steps over him.
She walks right across his back.
Right on his back. You had to get onto the yacht, to get onto the boat. Call it a yacht, Richard. Call it a yacht.
It made me think of Mr. Bentley on the Jeffersons, who always wanted people to walk on his back.
That's
so
true.
Richard was not very happy about it at all.
No.
So Richard gets in. Hyacinth bumps the throttle. The boat goes full throttle. And poor Richard is hanging onto the back, screaming as he's dragging in the water. And
it's so great.
It finally stops, and she says, "Richard, look at your jersey." Again, how dare you act this way?
Oh, it's genius.
Finally, the moment we've been waiting for.
Yes,
Richard is getting into the boat. The boat hits the bank, and Hyacinth flips over the rail, and lands in the water. And it's just priceless.
We knew it was going to happen. It was just a question of how was it going to happen. And of course, she ends up ass up in the river.
And that's one of the beautiful things, because you kept thinking, "Oh, here she goes." And nope. Here she goes. Nope. And finally, she fell off.
It's the payoff.
And finally.
No, I love it. So they come upon the end. What happens at the very, very end when they're all wet?
Elizabeth and Emmett finally show up, and they're looking for Hyacinth and Richard. I keep wanting to say his name's Howard. I don't know where that's coming from. They keep looking for Hyacinth and Richard, and they finally hear this squish, 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 squish. And they're looking around like, what on earth is that? And around the corner comes Richard and Hyacinth, absolutely drenched from head to toe. And
what is Hyacinth? Hyacinth saying about getting fish and chips?
Well, no. First she says, "Elizabeth, my nautical buffet has suffered a
That's right.
slight setback." And she said, we'll go home and we'll have some fish and chips.
Fish and chips. And of course, everyone, Elizabeth and Emmett are in delight about this. Oh, it's such a funny episode.
Their nautical buffet ends with fish and chips at home.
She just wanted a nautical buffet. She just wanted an evening of entertainment, a weekend on the river. And it's just, the woman cannot catch a fucking break. That's what I love about this show. She's her own worst enemy. She's the architect of her own downfall. But give the woman a break. I would just like to see her get a break once. Just once with some of this stuff. But she can't. She can never get a break.
No.
She can never get a break. Cool. So that was just... So before we go into my next one, I wanted to just say, so some of these people I thought it was important to point out, because Hyacinth is always trying to impress people. We talked about number 32. Some of the other people that in Hyacinth's life that she can't abide because she considers them snobbish show off.
Yes.
Such as Sonia Barker Finch, the Barker Finches, because of the hyphenate. She doesn't like the hyphenate. Delia Wheelwright and Lydia Hawksworth. And Lydia Hawksworth is the one who also might be a snob because she considers kiwi fruit lower middle class. Because Hyacinth does not have a snobbish bone in her body, and she can't abide snobbery like the snobbery of Lydia Hawksworth.
No, she very frequently says that she can't stand snobs.
Yeah, she can't stand snobs. She can't stand snobber. But I love that episode. I'm so glad you picked that episode because I thought it's just so hysterically funny. So my next episode is from the fourth season, episode 6, number 30, and it's called Please Mind Your Head. Now, this one is a special episode for me because it's the one I remember most watching, again, with my parents and them just laughing so much at this episode. It's kind of out of the ordinary in that finally, Richard's now retired. He retires in like the third season. And finally, they have purchased a country house. Sort of.
An estate.
An estate. So in the episode before this, Elizabeth takes Hyacinth out looking at property because Richard has to deal with Daddy. Daddy's in jail. We won't go into that because we're not talking about that episode. So she has purchased a micro unit, we find out, at an estate called Marston Hall. And it's very fancy. It's a beautiful, beautiful estate. It's like Downton Abbey, basically. So think about Downton Abbey for a minute. And they're living there. So when the episode starts, Hyacinth comes out the door, the front door of the estate, and you're thinking, wow, they're living at this estate now because they're waiting for their furniture to be delivered. Well, they're a little early. They're a few hours early, and Hyacinth says to Richard, why are you down here so early? And he said, because you told me to. So they have a couple hours to kill. So they decide to go up to their luxurious apartment in this estate. So they go up one stairway, a grand stairway, a beautiful stairway, and Hyacinth says, just think what an impression this stairway makes. And Richard says, well, this stairway. Because then they go up another stairway, and then they go up a third stairway, and they are inside basically the catacombs of this estate. It is truly the definition of a micro unit. And it's so micro that they actually have real size furniture in there, but you can't move. It's so funny because they've got the eaves. You can barely walk. Richard is walking around with his head cocked because it's the only way you can walk in this. It's the only way to walk. They have managed to fit 2 twin beds into their bedroom, but they can't get in and out of bed without... they can't get out and go around the bed. They've got to go over the bed. And they can't even open the door if one of them's in the bed. It's so silly. It's so funny. There's not necessarily anything which is hysterically funny verbally about this episode. But as I said, I have a real soft spot for this episode because it reminds me of my parents, because my parents loved it. They would laugh at this so much. I think one of my favorite scenes early in this episode is the kitchen scene, because you think the bedroom is small. The kitchen, it's not even, I think probably the kitchen on that yacht they were going to have the nautical buffet on is bigger than this kitchen. 2 people cannot navigate in this kitchen. And they constantly find themselves up against each other. which is very distressing to Hyacinth. She says to Richard, you just can't move. And she wishes Richard would remove himself from her person because they're up against each other. First of all, they're up against each other. Their butts are up against each other. And then they get unstuck. And Richard goes to get the tea and Hyacinth goes to get the milk. And they turn around and they're facing each other again, except they're facing each other from the front. And as you can imagine, it's very intimate. And it's a level of intimacy that Hyacinth is not comfortable with.
At their age.
She said... At their age. Well, she said to Richard, I do believe that you're expanding deliberately when they got stuck the first time. She doesn't believe that they just can't get around anywhere else. And she says that she doesn't like this level of intimacy. She doesn't think it's natural at their age because basically their privates are up against each other. Would you please remove yourself from my person, she says. So they become unstuck. It's just a funny set piece. So because the bouquets are gone in the country, at their country house, everybody is in a state of euphoria. The milkman, the postman, because they don't have to deal with them. Emmett is singing. He's leaving the house singing about the sun shining and the birds are singing because he knows he's not going to run into Hyacinth. Everybody's in a glorious mood until Elizabeth gets the phone call. But it's not to come over for coffee. It's to come visit them at their country estate. So, of course, Liz says yes.
For cucumber sandwiches, no less.
For cucumber sandwiches, exactly. And she's got to break the news to Emmett. Meanwhile, back at Onslow and Rose's house, back at Daisy and Onslow's house, Rose has announced that once again, she has given up men. So we know that's happening with Rose and Emmett and Onslow. We also know that they know that Hyacinth is at this new country estate. So we kind of get a little bit of a hint that they might end up at the country estate as well, which of course they do in the end. So when Hyacinth invites Emmett and Elizabeth over for tea and cucumber sandwiches, Elizabeth says yes. She breaks the news to Emmett. He doesn't understand why she just can't say no, but she can't because that's Elizabeth. But that's in the afternoon. In the meantime, Richard and Hyacinth are going to go. They're not going riding. They're going for a drive in the country, but they're wearing riding gear, something tweedy. That's what Hyacinth tells Elizabeth, to wear something tweedy. And Hyacinth says to Richard, we don't have to ride. We can just take photos. Exactly like social media, exactly like we were talking about now. They don't have to get on the horse. People will just think they're riding because of the way they're dressed and because of what they present. They're keeping up their appearance. So they are on their way in the country road and they run into Emmett and Elizabeth on their way to the country estate to visit Hyacinth and Richard for cucumber sandwiches, for tea and cucumber sandwiches, country tea and cucumber sandwiches. And of course, they get out of the car and Hyacinth is in full riding togs and riding gear, which is very funny. But so is Emmett. Emmett is an experienced rider. So Emmett sees his opportunity to do some upmanship with Hyacinth and says, why don't we all go riding together? Well, of course, Hyacinth has never been on a horse. Hyacinth doesn't know what to do about a horse. So there's a very funny physical scene with Richard trying to get Hyacinth on the horse. Eventually, she's on the horse, and she's trying to get the horse going, and Richard slaps its ass, and it takes off. It's right out of Auntie Mame, with Hyacinth holding on for dear life. She's fine. She's not hurt, but she's a mess. They all come back to the house for the tea and cucumber sandwiches because Hyacinth has invited a few people over for a little party, for a little get-together. Now, I don't know how she's going to fit all these people into this micro unit, but that's the point.
Well, that's the same thing Richard keeps asking.
Exactly. It's like, but that's Hyacinth. She's got to show off. She might be in a micro unit in the catacombs of this mansion, but people are going to know that she's living at this mansion. So it's Hyacinth is a mess. She wants to get ready. The guests start arriving. Liz spills lemonade on Emmett. Emmett ends up with his head through the ceiling. It's just one ridiculous mistake, one ridiculous plot point after another, until finally, of course, Daisy and Onslow and Rose and Daddy all show up at the house. Daddy doesn't come up because he doesn't want to handle the stairs. They all end up in the kitchen, and it's basically out of... Have you ever seen the Marx Brothers film where they all end up crammed into the stateroom?
Yes, I have.
And nobody can move, and then Margaret Dumont comes and opens the door, and they all fall out. Well, that's basically what happens. All these people end up crammed into this micro kitchen, and they can't move. And you're just thinking to yourself, why did they go in there? Why were they all going in there? They couldn't go in the living room because Emmett's head was through the ceiling. Okay. But so why don't they just say, no, turn them away? No, they all end up in the kitchen in a ridiculous thing. And Hyacinth's last line of the entire episode is, Elizabeth, telephone the emergency services. And that's the end of this very silly, silly episode. It's a lot of fun. I love this episode.
I love this episode. This was so funny, seeing her ride off with the horse. Oh my God. This was very slapsticky as well.
It's the physical bits.
Yes.
It's the physical bits mixed in with these brilliantly funny lines. You know, I think that's one thing this episode, this series does so brilliantly, is all of these hysterically funny physical comedy bits. And it's all pretty much Patricia Rutledge. And I mean, also Clive Swift. He joins in there too. But what a skilled physical comedian. What a skilled farceur. She just could do anything. She's really a gifted actress.
She really is.
And she makes it believable. She makes it all believable.
And there are a lot of great quotes in this one. And there's one about the antique furniture imitation, and I wish I wrote it down because
it's bijou.
Yeah,
it's bijou. Yeah. Yes. It's lacquered furniture. Her lacquered furniture. It's all first class lacquered furniture. She has her compact kitchenette.
Yes.
Is what she calls it. And the apartment is old world bijou. Which I looked that up. I don't know. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's old world bijou. If anybody knows, please text us or email us and let us know what old world bijou is. All right, so on to your second episode, Brad.
Okay, this is my second episode. This is the last one we're going to talk about today. This is from Series 5. It's Episode 4, A Riverside Picnic.
Love this one.
This is another one that's all about water. It's the 24th of September, 1995. And I don't know what it is. This one and the other one I did are the two that I remember most. I remember the first one you picked. The one at the estate, I absolutely did not remember, and I was so glad you picked it out because it was so funny.
Which, by the way, that's the last time we see that apartment. They obviously got rid of it because they never go back there again. I don't think they can. They've destroyed it.
And it's interesting because what I understand of, unlike the United States where you may have 30 writers, they like to have one or two writers so they can continue continuity. Which
it's Roy Clark.
We tend to be terrible with. And so that is one of the things they just never get back to that one.
They never get back to it. No, Roy Clark wrote every single episode of this series. It's astounding to me that he wrote these, every single episode. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this one begins with Hyacinth and Richard, and they're driving through the country roads. And she told him the country road was a great way to go. And immediately they get behind a truck with, I think it's manure in the back. I'm almost certain it's manure.
It's manure.
It's manure in the back.
Shit.
Yes. And so they're stuck going slowly behind this manure. And they're looking around the countryside, and all of a sudden, splat, right in the window, right in front of Hyacinth. Horse shit splashes on the window, or whatever it is.
Yes.
And so we cut to Richard cleaning off the windshield with obviously some hay that he got off the ground. And I love this. Hyacinth says, "Richard, please don't use that language." And he says, "I didn't say anything." And she says, "I can hear you thinking."
I can hear you thinking it.
So once again, she yells at him as they get back in the car and they're driving away. She screams, "Stop," once again. And of course,
yes.
Richard slams on the brakes and she wants to look at the river.
She's always doing that, though. When I love Hyacinth behind as the backseat driver, passenger driver, because you know, so she says, "Mind the cattle."
Yes.
He says, "They're in the fields. One might run out."
Yes.
She goes, "Stop, Richard." And he thinks she has stopped for an emergency. It's just because she wanted to look at the bridge, the river.
Yes. So as they're sitting there talking, she's getting very frustrated, or he's getting very frustrated. A car pulls up and starts honking. And she points out to Richard that there's a car honking. And of course, he knows this. And he starts driving away. And she goes, "You're in a funny mood today, Richard Bouquet. I can hear you thinking again. And I don't know if I've ever heard Richard say this. He said it's not bouquet, it's bucket. It's always been bucket until I met you.
Till I met you.
And I'm presuming he probably have said that other times, but this is the first time I ever heard him say that.
It's the first time I ever heard it in this show.
Yeah, and she says, we're not going to go there.
He says it to
again.
other people. He does say it to other people. He does say, well, it was bucket until I met her. But this is the first time he actually says it to Hyacinth, I believe. Yeah.
So then it cuts over to Oslo and Daisy. And they're sitting in, I'll say their garden, which is trash with this ratty umbrella over their head. And Oslo gets up. I couldn't hear what the actual words were. I played it a couple times. But he asked Daisy if she wants something. She said, oh, yes. She gets excited. He reaches in this pail of water, bucket of water, and he pulls out a beer for himself and a Mars bar for Daisy. And she takes it. It's all wet. And she reaches under her arms and she dries it in her armpits.
Isn't this when he asked her she asked him, whatever happened to that bird named Melanie that you dated? And she goes, who would name a bird Melanie? I love the British slang because bird means girl, woman. What happened to that bird Melanie?
Well, first she said, whatever happened to that old bird you dated? And he said, I married her.
That's right. Imagine naming a bird Melanie. Melanie.
So that's just, again, like we have this other little skit that's out of nowhere. And then we cut back to Richard and Hyacinth. And Richard is now rowing a boat up the river.
Mind the yacht, dear. I don't even see a yacht.
And poor Richard's rowing, and he's like, I can't see. And she said, why are you rowing backwards? And he said, that's the way it works. And I think she says, maybe when you learn how to do it, you can turn around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is the one and only time I think Hyacinth says we're going to have a picnic by the river.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to have everybody down. We're going to have a picnic by the river. This is a beautiful spot. So they go home. They're in bed. And the Hyacinth is looking through the dictionary.
Right.
She finds the right word.
Through Sheridan's dictionary. I found it in Sheridan's dictionary.
Yes. So they are no longer going to have a riverside picnic. They're going to have a waterside supper with riparian entertainment.
Riparian. That's the word I was thinking of. Riparian.
And she must say it 1,000 times after that.
My waterside supper with riparian entertainments. I love her.
So she invites the vicar and his wife, who I love the vicar.
That's why I love that you chose this episode, because we have one with the vicar.
Absolutely. And he's always praying to God, like, why did you do this to me?
That bucket woman. It's the bucket woman.
And his wife is a lot like Liz. And when Liz is trying to get Emmett to have a backbone, but she can't. And then the vicar's wife is always trying to get him to. It's great because he calls.
Just say no. Yeah, just say no to her. He can't do it.
He calls Hyacinth. She goes, oh, I'm so glad you're coming. And every time he starts trying to say he can't come, she cuts him off.
Well, doesn't he say something like, I can't, and she finishes, wait to come.
Yes.
Oh, I can't wait to have you come either, Vic. I mean, you were the first on the list, Vicar. Richard! And then he hangs up on her.
Thank
It's
you,
the only way he
yes.
can get off the phone. He hangs up on her.
And yes, he hangs up on her, and she says something like, Richie, he's so excited he hung up or disconnected or something.
He says, oh, so I couldn't get a word in edge.
Yes, I couldn't get a word in edgewise, even though she cut him off every time he tried to say 2 words. So then we have the postman, who again is trying to creep up to her home, and again tries to toss the mail onto her stoop. He doesn't reach the stoop, so he goes in to put it in the slot, and of course Hyacinth opens the door. He starts to leave, and she wants to know what he has for next door. What mail he has for Liz, basically.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I can't tell you that. And she says, I'm the one that mailed it. I just want you to know if you have it. And he tells her no. And so she turns her back and describes it so he can tell her if he has it.
Yeah.
And because she wants to know, again, if he has her invitation to the waterside supper with riparian entertainment. And he does. And he says, why did you mail it instead of putting it in the slot? And she says, because I have to do it. They have to see I use first class mail or postage.
First class stamp.
First class postage.
Yeah.
So Liz and Emmett get their invitation, and they, of course, don't want to go. Oh, and she invites her sister Violet.
She invites Violet.
Violet. With the Mercedes.
The song on Room for a Pony.
Yes, Room for a Pony.
But
yes.
now Violet has just gotten the musical bidet. This is now we've added the musical bidet to the sauna and Room for a Pony and the Mercedes.
And this is the first time where Violet has a somewhat big part.
We see Violet.
Yes.
This is because this is the 5th series, the 5th season, and we see Violet. This is the actress playing Violet, Anna Dawson. She only made a handful of appearances in the last series. And Bruce, once again, has fucked up. Bruce is Violet's husband. Apparently now he's drank what? He drank all her sherry, right?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
He drank all her sherry.
Which disturbs Hyacinth because she could have made a great trifle. Which, thank God for the Great British Baking Show, I know what trifle is.
You know what a trifle is, yes. But forget Bruce. He doesn't have to come to the picnic anyway. She just wants Violet to come because Violet's got her Mercedes, and have someone else drive you of equal stature, of equal financial stature, something like that.
Yes, that's what I love. Have somebody drive you
Yeah.
of equal financial stature. So she has the vicar packing up his car, and Emmett and Liz packing up their car, and their stuff is just all over the roof of their cars, and Hyacinth is making sure everything looks nice and neat and tidy, and make sure that the vicar has her Norwegian prawns that she ordered, and they all take off, driving through the country to the riverside. And they get on this bumpy road. Apparently they took a different road than they took before, because this time the road is bumpy, and they keep hitting potholes. And she's getting very frustrated with Richard with the potholes. And there's a great line with this, because she finally tells Richard she'll get out and she'll guide the way. So she's walking slowly, telling him where to turn to get around the potholes. And Emmett says something like, don't know if I could get past that temptation, or something of that nature.
Of hitting her.
Of hitting her,
'cause
yes.
She's out. Yeah.
So they finally get to the river, and they're carrying all this stuff. All of them are loaded down with stuff, including Hyacinth.
Tables, chairs, picnic baskets, china.
Hyacinth has a big umbrella. They're all loading stuff, and they're carrying it along the riverbank to find this perfect spot that she picked out. And I noticed they're going past some nice spots they could have a picnic, but no, they aren't the ones that Hyacinth picked out.
Yeah.
And they finally get there. She turns around a tree, and there is, what do you call one of those machines that pulls the dirt out of the ground?
Yeah.
And of course, she's offended that they had the nerve to do this.
Yes.
But
At her spot.
Yes.
At her spot that she'd picked. Yes.
of course, they're not going to turn back. They're going to move forward and find another place that is just as good. So they hike forever. They didn't find the perfect spot. They're rowing to find the perfect spot. And again, just like they were walking forever, now they're rowing forever. And she keeps saying it's just going to be around the next bend.
Around the next bend, I know it. And around the next bend, yes.
And I love that Emmett is kind of mocking her. And Liz says, if you don't do that, she won't invite us again. So then he continues mocking her, of course.
Continues to mock her on purpose, yes. And she's upset because Richard's going too slowly. She goes, they go much faster on the telly when they're He's like, well, there's 8 of them, and they don't have picnic baskets and china weighing them down. So she decides she's going to help him row.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
And so this is
cute.
This is where Emmett and the vicar get a good giggle. Because Hyacinth has one oar and Richard has another oar, which is not a way you row a boat very easily. And they're kind of going in circles. And then what happens next, Tony?
So they're not going fast enough. So Hyacinth stands up in the boat, and you think for a minute it's going to tip over, but it doesn't. So they start rowing together, but they're back. They can't see where they're going, and this is where the payoff is. But everybody else can see where they're going. And ahead of them is another one of these, what are they called? Dredgers? That pretty much have big buckets on them, ironically.
It's almost identical to the one that was in their picnic place.
Yes.
But now it's in the water.
And picks up the mud and the dreck and the water and brings it up, when you're trying to widen the waterway. But they don't see it. But everybody else sees it. And Liz even goes, look, Emmett, look. And they look. And this drudge, or whatever you want to call it, I don't know what the hell it's called. I'm a film historian. I don't know what it's called. I don't work for John Deere. Pulls up all of this water and, of course, opens it just above them and dumps all of this water on Hyacinth and Richard, drenching them. So again, Hyacinth gets her comeuppance, and so does poor Richard. But you know what? He puts up with her, so there you go.
Well, to me, what's funnier than the actual water coming down on her head is Emmett and Liz and the vicar, and I can't remember the vicar's wife, the look on their face when they see what's happening, and they're all so excited they can't wait.
They're all thrilled. They're all
they
thrilled.
know what's coming and they can't wait.
But in the meantime, Violet has shown up, and she is driving Onslow and Rose and Daddy and Daisy to meet Hyacinth at their meeting point, the original meeting point where they were supposed to meet, because Hyacinth invited Violet. She didn't invite the other ones. And Violet said to them, well, you're with me, so you're invited. So they go to the spot, and Hyacinth, of course, is not there because they all left. So they're having their own picnic. So they're actually having the waterside supper with riparian entertainment that Hyacinth had wanted. And it's beautiful. They've got their plates, and they're drinking champagne and wine. And you see the boat start to go past. And first you see...
This is where they get their riparian entertainment.
This is the riparian entertainment, because the boats go by, and first it's Emmett and Liz, right? And they wave and they go, hi, Daisy, hi, Rose, hi. And then, of course, the vicar and his wife go by, hi, oh, it's that dishy vicar. Oh, it's that dishy divorcee, Rose always says. Hi, can't stop, got to keep going. And of course, the next boat to come along is Hyacinth and Richard, totally soaked. Hyacinth is a mess, but she's keeping her stiff upper lip. And even Onslow says, look at that stiff upper lip. And she's like the queen sitting there, and she waves to them, and she gives the royal wave as she goes by them. And yes, she's a mess, but damn it, she's going to get through it.
Well, she's doing that because they're cheering her for having such a stiff upper lip.
They're cheering her because of her stiff upper lip.
Yes.
So she does the royal wave, and she's a mess. Her hair is in her face, and she's soaking. But, this is what happens when you're Hyacinth Bouquet. This is what happens. So it's such a funny episode. I always remember this episode, too, as being so hysterically funny.
Yeah, I love this one. So I think before we wrap up, we need to talk about why this series ended, because this is one of the reasons why I love Dame Patricia Rutledge.
Yeah, I do, too.
First of all, she just wanted to go on to something else. She felt like she was done with Hyacinth.
Yeah.
Second of all, she felt like he just was telling the same stories over again, which I guess maybe they were getting there. They didn't do what Bewitched did. But
it was not a Bewitched at all. They weren't retelling episodes. But yeah, you only have so many options.
This is what I love, because my frustration with TV series that go on too long, she said, and she got it from another actor, I don't know who it was, that you should always stop when you're on top.
Yes.
Unlike here, where
exactly.
we run shows for 10 seasons and the last 3 seasons suck. So I'm very happy she did that.
Yes. The actor she was talking about was named Ronnie Barker.
Ah, yes.
And what he said was, what she said was, I always thought of the great Ronnie Barker. He said, leave when you're on a high. And that's very hard for people to do, as we've seen. I mean, TV shows usually peter out, but there are a couple shows like the Dick Van Dyke Show, like the Mary Tyler Moore Show, where they said, no, we're going to leave on a high note. And that's absolutely what Patricia Rutledge did. Only five seasons, 44 episodes, not a lot, but they went on a high. And here's something interesting. So she immediately went into the Hetty Wainthropp investigation show. It's called Hetty Wainthropp Investigates. It's available on BritBox or Prime if you want to watch it. She'd actually done the pilot for Hetty Wainthropp before she filmed Keeping Up Appearances. And then she did the entire 5-series run of Keeping Up Appearances. And then once it was over, she went back to Hetty Wainthropp. And she did Hetty Wainthropp, I think, for 3 seasons. So she was working, she was doing musical theater. She didn't want people to say, I think it was Clive Swift said that she did not want, people just to know her as Hyacinth Bucket. But of course, that's what we all know her as. Of course. Is Hyacinth Bucket. How could you not?
Oh, no.
She didn't want that, but unfortunately, that's what we know. But, what a great legacy. What an incredible legacy this woman has. And this show has. What a gift, a shot of joy, at this time when it's kind of needed most, I think. It's just a wonderful balm. And that's what great TV comedies do. They give you joy in times that might not be so joyous.
Absolutely. And first, listener, I need to apologize because I realized, I think, through this entire episode, I have been speaking like the Queen of England. Trying to talk with I'm terrible with accents. It doesn't matter what language or what kind of inflection. I can do Southern because I lived in the South, but that always picks up when I talk. Oh, well, good. I'm glad I did fine. Maybe I didn't do I didn't do as bad as I thought.
I'm not much better, so and I was an actor. There you go.
So I do want to just quickly touch on the prequel. They did,
please do.
I thought they originally said they were going to do a series, but it ended up being a one-up 30-minute show. Did you watch
just
it,
a
Tony?
one-off. I did.
Okay.
Not good.
No, it was awful. I thought it was just awful. Patricia Rutledge was not happy they were doing this. She thought it was unnecessary.
Yeah.
And she was right. If there was no humor in it, I felt like they should have done it more as a drama because it was very sad, really.
Yeah, those things they rarely ever work. It's an interesting, when you think about it, it's kind of an interesting idea because, listener, in the prequel, it's young Hyacinth. So it's basically Hyacinth before she leaves her family. So we kind of get to see these people before they became the characters that we all know. But how do you follow up with that? How do you create that? These characters are iconic. At least Hyacinth is iconic. You're not going to find an actress, unless you're really, really fortunate, who's going to be able to have the same kind of effectiveness that Dame Patricia Rutledge has. So it wasn't an interesting idea, one and done, probably the best.
Well, here's my feelings on it. As I said, it was boring and it was sad. And I think I quit a third of the way through. I'm like, maybe it gets better, but I can't take it anymore. This is just bad. I didn't want to remember it as part of the show.
Yeah, so skip young Hyacinth if you really want to have a great Keeping Up Appearances experience. Watch the episodes Brad and I talked about. There's a whole bunch of other episodes which are so funny. These were hard to pick as well. There's one called 3-Piece Suite, which I loved, which I almost did, because Hyacinth is getting new furniture delivered, and they're the same people that deliver the Queen's furniture, because it's got the royal warrant, and she wants to make sure everybody, number 32, sees the royal warrant, of course, and there's a total mess in the end. And Daisy and Onslow end up delivering the furniture in this truck. There's wonderful, brilliant episodes. Watch it. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. If you don't know Keeping Up Appearances, or if you barely remember it, give it a shot. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience.
And for future listeners, this is November of 2023. If you want to watch it right now, you can watch it on BritBox. Please do that, because I'm all for people getting their residuals.
Yeah.
However, I know reality, if you don't get BritBox, there are some of these episodes on YouTube, and there are even some on Facebook. Somebody has a Facebook account.
Yeah. It's all over.
It's all over the place. But there's not. You can't really get on the usual networks that are here in the U.S.
Well, no, and the great thing about BritBox is you have a whole bunch of other wonderful shows.
Exactly.
You have all of the Miss Marples, you have the Poirots, you have Hetty Wainthropp, so you can see Patricia Rutledge's follow-up to Keeping Up Appearances. So, well, this was a lot of fun. I'm so glad we went outside our comfort zone over to the UK to talk about this wonderful, iconic TV series, Brad.
This was great. I'm glad we did it before the end of the season.
Yeah.
And we have 2 more before the end of the season, I believe.
We got 2 more to come. 2 more to come before we wrap up, and a special Christmas episode, just as they did on Keeping Up Appearances, coming for you. So, yeah, this has been so much fun. I don't want to say goodbye, Brad. So let's not say goodbye. Let's say au revoir.
No, let's say goodbye.
I knew you were going to do that. Goodbye, everybody. That was bad.